At the last, in 1999, Saddam decided this man was extremely dangerous. He had him assassinated by his gunman, along with 2 of his sons. And so Muqtada was taking over a movement, and his family were regarded as martyrs. His father-in-law, Mohammed Bakr al-Sadr, was executed by Saddam in 1980. He was a great Shia theologian. So this was a family of martyrs, regarded with great respect by Iraqi Shia, and they would compare them, perhaps unfairly, to exiles returning from abroad, who they thought had been cavorting in 5-star hotels in New York and Los Angeles and London, while they'd been suffering in Iraq. Muqtada always brings this up, we stayed in Iraq, the others went away. We were here, we shared the suffering of the people, and we died for it.
So the theology of persecution, the personal history of persecution, and the family name account for who and what he is.
Yeah, that was one of the, that was the background to it. Of course, he was also against the occupation, the US occupation.
When others weren't.
Yeah, all the other Shia leaders thought, hold on a minute, we will use the, almost all Iraqis were in favor of getting rid of Saddam Hussein. That was one thing. The second thing was the occupation. The Iraqis were divided on this. Some of the Shia leaders thought we will use it to take over. We're the majority. They would say we made a mistake under the British. We rose up against the British when they occupied Iraq. We won't do that. And the Sunni took power. We won't do that this time. This time round, we will go along with the occupation in order to take power. All we need to do is have elections and we'll win them. Muqtada never accepted that, said we're exchanging the little Satan for the big Satan, and he's always opposed the occupation. You have these journalistic cliches about the renegade cleric and so forth in a way.
Yeah, I want to talk about those. Talk about because one of the, I guess one of the things on the street that I hear from people, Iraqis that I know, and those outside of Iraq that I know, is that he's basically a dullard, that he is a thug, that he has a sort of an armed gang, and where does the story of his being just an ignorant dullard come from? And it's pretty widespread, but where does it come from?
Well, the exiles all used to say this when they came back, and of course they underestimated him. They thought they thought he completely ignored, and they told, in early days, they told the Americans this. Secondly, his movement has always been of the poor, so a lot of the better established businessmen, the sort of people at universities, have had this sort of mixture of contempt and fear of him, fear of the Iraqi street, fear of these people who have nothing, who except their submachine guns, people of, in Sadr City, this great bastion of support. This is pretty well a twin city to Baghdad. It's 2.5 million people. The population of Baghdad is only about 5.5 to 6. So they've always been frightened of him. And like many frightened people, they want to say that their enemy is both, or their potential enemy is both stupid and of no account, leads a few thugs. But first of all, in Iraqi politics, you don't survive if you're stupid. There's some real mean people there, but not many really stupid people there, because you end up dead. This is somebody who survived Saddam and has survived the American occupation, has survived many things, not stupid. Had lots of political experience under his father, ran a magazine for his father's political movement, ran his father's office for a time, was his representative in Sadr City at another moment. As a young man in his 20s, he gained more experience of Iraqi politics than anybody else. Always been good at maneuvering, never lets him, these other cliches, firebrand, cleric, and so forth, but actually always lets a lot of time calls ceasefires, never wants to be boxed into a corner. So I think a clever, astute politician with a long background in Iraqi politics.
I want to talk about that in a minute, but one of the things he is violent. It has been a very violent movement in a very violent country that didn't just get violent in 2003. I mean, you give, I think, a remarkable feel for the country, especially in the decade that preceded the violence of Saddam, the post-Kuwait Shia uprising that was put down so brutally. One of the questions I had when I came out of that was that knowing that and then hearing the exiles say, all you've got to do is just peel off the layer of Saddam and his leadership, and the country will fall in place. Get rid of the bad guy, and there's been so much violence. People will celebrate, and Iraq will be whole again. That was almost believable, given the amount of violence that the regime imposed on people. But it turned out to be the other way.
Sure, yeah. And one of the things in the book, you know, the great Shia uprising of 1991, you know, maybe 150,000 people were killed. This sort of, I read about it at the time, and I was in Iraq part of that time, and I thought when I came back to write the book, there'll be more information about it, but I found nobody had really written this up, although it's central to the way Iraqis think about things. I think that, you know, one of the things I did want to do in this book was, there are quite a lot of books on Iraq at the moment, but some of them successful, some of them good, but they tend all to be the American view, even those that are completely against the occupation, and they say, you know, President Bush did not understand the way Iraq, he didn't consult Iraqis. Then you read through, the book turns out to be all about Americans, all about the Green Zone, it's about you know, Blackwater, it's about other things. So I think what I'd like to think that this book is all about Iraqis, all by Iraqis, all the quotes are Iraqis. There's almost no American, no non-Iraqi quoted.
I guess the question I'm asking, though, is that the violence was internalized, and therefore the violence turned inward.
Yeah, Iraq was a very violent place. It was very violent before the Iraqis came. It was violent because of the extraordinary, in the long-term violent history, Iraq was in between the Ottoman Empire and the Persians. The Ottomans kind of ran it. But actually, in most of Iraq, from the time of the Mongols, outside the cities, nobody ran it. Tribes, cities, towns, individuals, clans, you looked after your own security. That tradition still remains. More recently, you had the Iran-Iraq War, 500,000 Iraqis killed, wounded, prisoners. You had devastation of after the war, after Saddam invaded Kuwait. You had a collapse of the currency, suddenly became worthless. It's very difficult to convey, but one analogy I draw is, it's as if the 1929 crash in the United States had been worse than it was. The currency, the dollar, had become worthless. And secondly, it had gone on for 15 years, with most of the population unemployed. Economy destroyed, the society dislocated, fragmented. And the casualties of this are the people who support Muqtada. I don't think that people have really taken on board what happened to Iraq, and also the legacy of violence left by Saddam as well. Saddam reacted to any opposition with extreme and excessive violence.
So you have the context, which is a Shia community that has suffered for well over a millennium, that has felt a persecution and has developed a complex about it. You have an extraordinarily violent circumstance, and you have a group of people particularly dispossessed, and a family and a family name that is has an important legacy. And out of that emerges this young man to claim the mantle against a leadership in the country that was fractionalized itself. And I want to talk about that right now, because there were many threads, both internal and external, that this person, Muqtada, had to compete with. And I want to ask you the reaction of the various ones. First, the exiles, you talked about that. They found him quite frightening because he didn't quite fit into their plans and into their place. And then there was Ayatollah Sistani, who was the leader, not just nominal leader, but the most important theological voice. How did he view Muqtada? As a threat?
With suspicion, for a number of reasons. One, there was a theological difference between the activist clergy, Muqtada and his family, who said, you know, you must be active. You must oppose Saddam, even if you get killed.